I'd like to talk about some hypocrisy that's been in the news lately, and it tends to be mostly on the left and mostly by very elite people that you wouldn't expect because we were told, of course, they were populists and men and women of the people. Let's take Rachel Maddow. She's on MSNBC. Her audience has declined drastically. She typically works 1 day out of 5 per week. I think after the election, she was coming in a little bit more often, and that's going to terminate, and she'll go back to her 1 day. She took a pay cut from $30 million to $25 million. MSNBC is a money-losing operation. They are firing entire swaths of news presenters and readers and also staff.
And worse than CNN is MSDNC, which is the worst. And the good news is very few people watch them anymore. They have lost such credibility. And Rachel Maddow should be forced to resign. Nobody watches her anyway. I don't know if it's not possible they pay her as much money as I hear, but certainly she's lost all credibility, both of them. But what they said the other day, they should be forced to resign about that young person.
One of the channels we often talk a lot about here in this show is MSNBC, which is the big sort of
MSDNC.
MSDNC, MSKGB, perhaps even. Who knows? But it's but it is this channel that is where basically all the most radical leftist kind of propaganda goes.
But here's my point. She went on MSNBC this week and blasted them for firing Joy Reid, and especially treating, she said, their shared staff poorly, and they laid them off, and she was very angry. But if you look at the size of her audience, about 1 million more or less, and you look at the size of her salary, and you look at, unlike her Fox counterparts who come in 5 days a week, she only comes in 1 day, and you look at how long she's had this sweetheart deal, don't you think you could say to this woman of the people, this socialist, Rachel, you probably made 100 or 200 million. If you really are upset about the firing of poor Joy Reid and the firing of the staff, I have a polite suggestion for you. You make now 25 million. Let's say that those staffers were making 100,000. Do you realize if you just said, I, Rachel Maddow, tonight promise that I will work my 52 days this year for free, given the ample compensation I have received, and I will fund 250 staffers at MSNBC for $100,000 a year, given what I make, $25 million. Let's just try that. As far as Joy Reid goes, she had an audience of about 150. I live about 20 miles from Visalia, California. That's about 150,000 residents. In other words, we're a nation of 335 million people. Joy Reid was talking to one moderate-sized city of about 150,000. In other words, to the people of Visalia. Everybody else had no idea who she was or what she was saying. She was getting at $1.3 million. She's always attacked. She cannot finish a sentence without using the word white, 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 white. And she's very liberal, liberal, liberal. Let me just finish. One of the ironies of the Doge project and this reexamination of federal monies and the reexamination since the election of the media in general, especially on the left, is we have a weird phenomenon with very powerful people, very wealthy people, very politically connected people, have one rule, one protocol, one value judgment for all of us, and they have no intention of following it themselves. They're never subject to the consequences of their ideology. All of these things demand the question, why now? Why all of a sudden are we no longer crazy that Joe Biden was not fit as a fiddle, that there's more to January 6th than we're told? And I could go on and on about these 11th hour revelations. It's either A, they're afraid there's going to be an accounting very quickly from the Trump administration, and they know that they had done things that were not just ethical, but perhaps illegal. Number two, it also could be that in time, and they are opportunists. Most of these people that I talk about, they see the national mood changing, that we're at peak woke, and the reputation of the FBI or the NEIH or journalism in general is at an all-time nadir. Or maybe it's something even more dramatic, like if I were Donald Trump and his team and we had lied and done all of these things, and I was now in power, I know what I would do to people like myself. So it's a projection that they have a feeling of culpability and exposure, and now they're trying to get everything out before there's an accounting. Whatever the reason is, it's quite amusing and in a tragic way funny.
So Donald Trump wants some rare earth concessions. If I was Zelensky, I'd sign it, because that would get a huge American company on the ground in Ukraine, and it would give income to Ukraine, and you would get if it was secure and there was peace, you'd get other foreign investment if a big American company was there. But it's not the key issue. The key issue is that Zelensky has taken $200 million. He says he doesn't know where some of it is, but we think we've given him $200 in military and economic aid. And we don't have a strategy from the Biden administration. Nobody knows what the strategy is. I think I do know. It's something along the line, we're going to give Zelensky enough money so he is not going to lose, but we're not going to give him enough munitions to win the war, because the war is unwinnable.
Victor Davis Hanson breaks down the chaos unfolding across the West, from failed leadership to economic decline and rising authoritarianism. As Europe stumbles under the weight of reckless policies, energy crises, and mass migration, its leaders push censorship instead of solutions. Germany, once the engine of Europe, is now struggling with deindustrialization, soaring costs, and an exodus of its brightest minds. Can the U.S. and its allies recover before it's too late? Hanson connects the dots and reveals the uncomfortable truths the media won't touch. Watch now.
So that seems to be the strategy, and nobody ever asked themselves, who are now criticizing Donald Trump. The Wall Street Journal never asked itself. Nobody ever says, how did we get into this mess? And so then we had Donald Trump, and Donald Trump said, no mas. Mr. Trump, the oligarchs are starting to proliferate. We need more. Yes, give them more sanction. That's what he did. And Putin didn't go anywhere. And then he leaves. And what did Biden do? So he canceled them. And then they said, Mr. Biden, President Biden, we're worried that Putin might be on the move again. Well, Mr. President Biden, that's not deterring. Now, all of that is suddenly turned into Trump's fault right now. And that is absolutely crazy. They had no strategy. What are America's strategic aims there? So we know what we should be doing. Number one, we do not want to get into the middle of a European theater war. This is on Europe's doorstep. Number two, we want the Europeans, 9 of the 32 NATO countries have never honored their 2% pathetic military expenditures of GDP. We want them all to make the 2%. We'd like to see 3 or 4. They have an economy about 10 times larger than Russia, the EU, and the NATO countries. We want them to rearm, and we want them to help Ukraine. And we want that not because we're leaving NATO. We want them to do that because they and us are threatened by a rising Pacific belligerent. Not Japan this time, but China. And we need to use a lot of our forces to deter China from what? Being aggressive with Australia, South Korea, Taiwan, and Japan, and the Philippines. That's what we want to do. Number 3, we would like to save the Ukrainian people. And finally, as I said earlier, we want to break up the Chinese, Russia, Iran, North Korea nexus. That's very easy. That was nothing. Nobody ever did that under Obama. Nobody ever did that under Biden. And that's what Trump said, that he was going to stop the war in the first day. You couldn't stop the war the first day. That was a rhetorical excess. None of the European countries, I mean, they invented free speech in the European Enlightenment, or maybe you could say the Greeks did. They had a word for it, isagoria, that you had an equal opportunity to speak out in the assembly. But the thing about it is they have no First Amendment. They have no Bill of Rights. So they have consistently, and I'm including the UK here, they consistently censor speech. And what they call hate speech is just speech that they don't like. What do I mean by that? So if you're a German and you say, I'm tired of all of these crazy immigrants that come in my country, I want to deport them all, they have no business here, and you get angry, you're probably going to be cited. And so everybody knows that. So that's what we're talking about, and that's what J.D. Vance was talking about. I think a lot of people, and by the way, the 60 Minutes clip that I saw, they were admiring what Germany was doing. They want to do it here too, and they have been doing it here. And they do not want a freewheeling, open society. And so that was what J.D. Vance was saying. He's saying, how you people, you keep saying that Russia, Russia, Russia. Well, yeah, I don't like Russia either, but you're employing the same tactics. And we can't get along with you and defend the West when you're eroding it. And again, is what he was doing. He was telling not just MAGA, and not just those ministers, corrupt though they were, he was telling the people in the populist parties of Europe, you are on the right track. Secure borders, legal-only immigration, rearming, deregulate, detax, more personal freedom. And if you were to do that, we would be closer than ever, because that's what we're trying to do. And the Biden nightmare that we lived through is now your ongoing nightmare. You haven't gotten rid of it. And that was what got them all so angry. Why do people do this? Final rant. Why do they have hate speech? Because it's an indication that they are unpopular and they're failing. If the German government was popular and German, like, let's say, I don't know, not Merkel, the pre-Merkel, Helmut Kohl, 12 years as chancellor, everybody liked him. The German miracle was in full blast. Merkel was the one that blew up the German economy, the German culture, the German reputation, and her hatred of Trump, among other things, and her open borders and her insane Green New Deal. That woman will go down in history as the worst German chancellor. But my point is, they are insecure. And why are they insecure? Because they have created a Germany, as I said earlier, it's like the Morgenthau plan of World War II, where you were going to make Germany by coercion after the war. The U.S. Treasury Secretary said we should turn them into a pastoral state, and to deindustrialize the Ruhr, and that's what they're doing. So their energy costs 4 times more than it does in the United States. Their fertility rate is 1.4. They let in 16% of their population is not born in Germany. They do not assimilate or integrate as well as we do. They have let in, percentage-wise, a higher number of illegal immigrations than even Joe Biden did. Their companies are increasingly non-competitive. They lie about their percentage of GDP they spend on defense, but it's about 1.5. It is not the 2, and they know that. And other countries who welch out on what they owe say, look at Germany. It did, so we can. So they are failing. They're failing, and they had exactly zero GDP growth a year ago. And this last year, they may have a slight in 2024. A year and a half ago, they had none in 2023. Negative. This year they may have a slight. So they're failing economically, socially, culturally, politically, militarily. And everybody's trying to tell them to wake out of their slumber, deregulate, cut taxes, start using natural gas energy and nuclear energy, get cheap energy again, close your borders, integrate people, have legal only meritocratic immigration. And people are leaving. I used to be everybody was just leaving Britain, but we had a job at the Hoover Institution. We had 900 applicants for a junior fellow, and I could not believe how many brilliant German scholars and historians were applying. I mean it. And then I looked and you looked at in all fields, political science, economics, Silicon Valley is, the German elite is starting to leave. And that's hard because Germany is it's not close to, it is closer than I suppose to English than it is to Spanish. It's not a Romance language either, but it's a difficult language, and a lot of Germans have trouble, vice versa, Americans learning these languages, and yet they're over here. And we don't have the same relationship we had with Britain. We were enemies of 2 wars with Germany, and yet here they are, and they're fleeing the United States. If Donald Trump is successful and he deregulates and reduces taxes, and he won't do it right away, but if he gets 3 to 5% GDP growth and he closes the borders and makes meritocratic immigration, you will see a wagon train from Europe. And unlike Biden, he will not discourage them because they are not the right color or religion or background. That whole Biden-Merkel mentality, Obama, we lost $5 billion. I think Ford alone lost almost $5 billion on this EV mandate. And it was even worse over there with Porsche and Audi and BMW and Mercedes and Volkswagen. It was just mindless when they were producing basically zero emission, beautiful automobiles that you could only argue were polluting because they were producing heat, but not toxic fumes or chemicals. And then by their same policy of forest management here in the United States, in California, we were letting more carbon into the atmosphere with all these huge fires every summer than all the cars in 2 weeks or 3 weeks combined did.